join us today. My name is Gift, and I'll be the facilitator for today. Um, First, some housekeeping rules. Please ensure that your microphone is muted at all times when you are not speaking. Um, yeah, to ensure less interference of noise. Today, we are joined by 4 panelists who will be going through the application process and how to get scholarships in Australia and in New Zealand. But first, I really want to say thank you to the panelists. We understand the time difference between Nigeria and Australia or New Zealand. So we appreciate the sacrifice you're making, and we know this is like a great sacrifice. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your commitment. Our panelists today include Samuel Adeleye, then we have Chinonso, Chigozie, and Emmanuel. As usual, the panelists will introduce themselves and then we'll take some groundbreaker questions. Please remember that this session is a question and answer session, so generously make use of the chat box, put in your questions, whatever you want to know. Our panelists are here ready to answer your questions. So we can make a start. Samuel Adeleye, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, it's still morning here anyway because it's 11:03 a.m. where I am. It's good to meet everyone. My name is Samuel. I'm a graduate fellow here at Rutgers University in the United States. I'm happy to be here. I have copied one of the statements from one of my big guys that said, I don't know so much, but I know little enough to make me dangerous when it comes to applying to scholarships. So feel free to ask me your questions about whatsoever it is regarding applications today, and I think I'll do my best to reach out. You can check the what is the name, about a little about my profile. That's on the PowerPoint. I'm sure it's displayed there. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. I'm sure Samuel did not mention that he got a scholarship to Australia. Samuel, is that right?
Yeah, very correct.
Yeah, and he declined because he's a very big man. So we'll now proceed to Chinonso. Chinonso, can you kindly introduce yourself? Tell us your current affiliations and anything you want us to know for now.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. My name is Chinonso Christian Odebat, and former Commonwealth Scholar at University of Exeter, and then I currently have a PhD offer at University of Queensland. So I'm also working as a lecturer in the NAMDA School of University. So I believe this is going to be a very interesting section because I know a lot of people, a lot of us are looking up to getting a scholarship to do our master's or PhD abroad, and we're here to answer all your questions and whatever concern you may have regarding graduate school application and anything you need to know about Australian scholarship. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chinonso. That was really brief and straight to the point. The next person is someone I really admire so much. I read your profile and I fell in love with it. Chigozie, do you want to kindly introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Chigozie Nwachukwu. I'm currently in Australia. I just completed my dual master's degree in international public health and infectious disease intelligence. I was reached out to be part of this session. I look forward to it, to share the little that I know as far as the particular scholarship in is involved and what I know as far as PhD scholarship in Australia is involved. So feel free to ask your question. I'll be able to provide you answer to the limit of our knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We look forward to hearing your insights that can help us all get scholarships in Australia. Our last panelist today is joining us from New Zealand. He's Emmanuel. Emmanuel, can you kindly introduce yourself, please? Um, Sorry, we cannot hear you, Emmanuel.
I guess this is an audio technicality. Do you mind leaving and rejoining again? That works sometimes.
Okay, so while waiting for Emmanuel to introduce himself later, I think we can start off with some questions. Yeah, so my first question will go to Chigozie, since you are currently in Australia and you just completed your master's. So I know a lot of the people in the audience are asking, why should we be interested in studying in Australia? Popular study destinations are like Europe or the US or Canada. So from your experience and reflecting on your experience as an Australian scholar, why do you think this is a good study location?
Thank you very much, Gift. Maybe I should start with why I find myself in Australia different from the popular study destination. I would say it's a matter of providence. It wasn't like it was planned, but then an opportunity presented itself. I capitalized on that, and I got the opportunity to come to Australia. Prior to coming to Australia, I don't really know much about the Australian education, but having come in and experienced it and interacted with other students, especially from Nigeria, I realized that many Nigerians are now using Australian education both as an immigration platform and as a platform to expand their knowledge base to come to Australia. Australia education is actually great because of its location. It's like, one of the popular places in Australia is the outback. So Australia itself is like the outback of the world. So most people don't really know what it's available here. I think the people that have really taken advantage of Australia education are the Chinese, which are more in number when it comes to population of international students in this very place. So Australia education is very great. It's a system that allow you to think on your own. It's a system that imbue you with, those critical thinking skills that the world actually need now, not like, the didactic system that we are all used to. So for people that might not know about Australia before Australia education, I think it's a good place to begin to look at in terms of furthering your education, because they have some of the best universities in the world. They have many of their universities are competing at the topmost level with universities in Europe, in US, in Canada, and all that. So from my experience, I think it's a great one and it's worth considering for anyone that want to have a world-class education.
Thank you so much. Oh, now I'm sold. I'm going to apply to a university in Australia. But let's hear from Chinonso. Chinonso, after your master's in the UK, why did you choose to do a PhD in Australia?
Thank you, Gift, for that question. Basically, when I finished my master's in the UK, I had an interest to
Sorry. Sorry, Chinanto, I'm interrupting you. Please, everyone, ensure that your microphone is muted. If not, you'll be disturbing the sound from the panelist. Please, thanks. Chinanto, continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gift. Thank you for that opportunity. So, like I was saying, following my completion of my MSc in the UK, I was only interested in two countries. That's Australia and Canada for my PhD. Yes, I know some opportunities present itself for me to maybe consider Europe, for example, UK PhD, which I actually applied to. But in the end, I was also considering a place that not only gave me the opportunity to not just do my studies, but also be able to express myself. For example, gaining additional skills upon completion of my program. So I had only two countries in mind, like I said before, and I applied to these two countries, Canada and Australia. And interestingly, I had offers. I had a PhD offer in both countries, in Canada and also in Australia. But I chose Australia for very specific reasons. One is that it's a 3 years program, right? I mean, Canada, I mean, my admission letter says 5 years minimum. And I'm not ready prepared to go for studies for 5 years and just doing a PhD where I can get it done in 3 years in Australia or, maximum of 4 years. Then secondly, I chose Australia because of my supervisor, right? The supervisor I would be working with is currently, he was the one that supervised my master's project from the UK. So it was more like a continuation of where I stopped from my master's dissertation. And it's more like an opportunity for me to at least get to know him more better. And yeah, I mean, Canada is a great country to be in, but I think for me personally, it has to do with the duration of the program, and secondly, the supervisor, and thirdly, the university itself. I mean, University of Queensland, it's one of the best universities in the world, and I really love to go and study in a university that will not only offer me professional development, but also global recognition upon completion of my PhD. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chinanto, for sharing some of the perks of studying in Australia. We have so many questions already, but before going into the questions in the chat box, Emmanuel, can you kindly introduce yourself now?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. Thanks.
Better. I'm sorry about that. Just an audio each. Yeah. My name is Emmanuel Egbadon. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Canterbury here in New Zealand. Before I left Nigeria, I was lecturing at the Department of Microbiology at the Federal University of Technology, Owerri. And yeah, I chose, although I also tried applying for a PhD position at University of Warwick in the UK. I also had opportunities also in Australia and New Zealand. I actually settled for New Zealand because of, number one, the research project that I was working on, and also because of the supervisor that I got, and also to try out a place that people don't naturally want to go to. Yeah, so the project I'm actually working on is has something to do with the environment, and I really loved it. So I chose that New Zealand is actually a very good place to come to. People also come here, to use the study route as a pathway to want to stay back. So New Zealand offers that, and yeah, it's quite also easy to get a PhD um, scholarship here. I wouldn't say easy, but then it's way better than what I experienced with the UK system. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We have a question for you, Emmanuel. The question is, if I intend studying in New Zealand, which comes first? Do I need to get an admission first or scholarship first? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that's currently we have about just 5 universities in New Zealand. And interestingly, they all have almost the same thing. They operate using the same model. You just need to get an admission first. And using your admission, while filling out your application form, there is a scholarship option. So you get an admission and also apply for a scholarship. So you'll get the scholarship with the admission or not. So yeah, and in some cases, I always advise some people to actually reach out to a supervisor first. That boosts or increases your chance of getting a scholarship. So the professors um, are able to also support some students in their scholarship applications. So yeah, so there are two options. It's either you're applying straight with the university system, or you're getting it straight from the professor, your prospective supervisor. So I always advise people get a prospective supervisor first, who is likely to support your application for a scholarship. Yeah.
Thank you so much. You know, the idea of having a supervisor first has come up in Chinonso's comment, and now you're bringing it up again. I would like to ask Samuel's opinion on that. Do you think it's necessary for someone applying to get a PhD scholarship in Australia to first get a supervisor? I know we spoke about this exhaustively. Yeah, do you think it's necessary?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And for the person that is unmuted, can you please mute yourself because of interference? I'm hearing a lot of interference in the background. Yeah, the need for contacting a supervisor to get funding in either Australia, New Zealand cannot be overemphasized. To be honest, I applied to AGT, I can't remember, Australian GTPRS scholarship, I think it's available. You can Google it. And when I applied for it, even when you go to most of the PhD scholarships that are available, you will know that first of all, you must get a supervisor. When the supervisor is ready, he will write a letter of support for you, saying, I have spoken to this person, and now this person is going to be under me if he's given this. And the fact that you get the scholarship, anyway, depends on what you're applying to in Australia. If the project is funded by the supervisor himself, then it's possible for him to get you easily. But most of the funding are institutional, and some even by the country. So just like you get a supervisor, you will now compete for the position with other applicants who have also have a supervisor. So without a supervisor, I don't want to put it so rigid, but I can tell you, without a supervisor, no Australia. So as far as PhD is concerned, yeah. So that would be a very simple sentence to let everybody know. So you definitely must get a supervisor, which is very, very important.
Thank you so much, Samuel. For those who are just...
Can I add something to what he just said?
Yeah, definitely, Chinan, so go ahead.
Yeah, I think about 80 or 90% of the time, you probably need a supervisor, but there are still very minute chance that you have to, it could go either way. Now, what I mean by that is there's what we call expression of interest form. So some schools will ask you like something like Queensland Technology or University of Queensland Technology. They will ask you to, write an expression of interest form and then send it out to the department. So if the project you're proposing, for example, you obviously have to write a research interest or a brief research proposal. So if the project you're proposing is somehow does interest any of the faculty member, they will be the one to contact you directly. So either way, I mean, it's still more like getting a supervisor first anyway, but it's not the same way as contacting supervisor, like writing emails, waiting for their replies. Now the application platform is like you have to send an expression of interest form to the school, and then they will assess whatever it is you've presented. It's stage by stage. So once they assess that and they like the proposal you're making, obviously they will contact you, and then you take up the application from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So apparently, you need to contact supervisors in most cases, but in some few cases, as students mentioned, you really don't need to do that. If you want information on how to send emails to supervisors, we discussed this exhaustively last week. And so you can go watch the recordings, and we are putting together a document that discusses this further. So yeah, as long as you registered, you get the document soon enough. Some other questions in the chat box. I would like to sort of condense the question because somebody has asked something about research experience. Someone else has asked something about GRE application, if they need GRE to apply for PhD. So if I am looking to apply for a PhD in UK, in Australia or New Zealand, what can set me apart? Do I need GRE? What if I don't have research experience? What's your advice to me? We'll start from Chigozie. Chigozie, are you there?
Okay, thank you, Gifts. Okay, well, your question is related to PhD, which to a large extent, I don't have much experience as I have not undergone the process, but again, I will be able to say something with regards to what sets you apart if you don't have research experience. But of a truth, for Australia, one of the things that will really set you apart is some research experience, especially if you have publications. That is one thing that anyone thinking about coming to Australia should begin to think about. We are not so great in publishing, but I've come to realize that every publication must not be based on probably what you have done in the lab, some research work you have done. Your publication could come from things of interest to you, maybe conversation you had with a friend that spurs some ideas within you, with which you could begin to put something up for publication in a journal. So journal publication is one of the things that could set you apart for Australia. Be that as it may, that many of us may not actually have research experience. When it comes to PhD, your performance, because if you don't, for Australia, your PhD could either be straight from your first degree if you graduate with honors, or after your master's. So if you don't actually have a publication out there, your thesis in whichever level you finish from could actually also speak for you, because what the supervisors are interested in is, do you have that research skill? Do you have that skill in putting together a publishable work, which you can actually demonstrate from your thesis that you have submitted either in your first degree or in your master's, assuming you don't have any publication. For Australia, there is nothing like GRE. The only thing that might be required is test of English, the academic IELTS, which also for many universities, it is often waived. I've tried to research some university, like something like Monash University, which is like one of the topmost university in Australia. I can't say vividly from what I've read on their websites. For IELTS, they could waive it for someone coming from Nigeria. especially if you are coming from something like University of Lagos, University of Nigeria, University of Ibadan. They've listed those schools because they know that you had your education, your prior education in English language. So English language should not be a challenge for you in continuing your education. Um, but if it's for schools that require IELTS, I don't think your score will really make a huge difference in your being accepted. One of the things that will make a huge difference for you is your ability to articulate what you want to do, your ability to convince your would-be supervisor that what you want to do is relevant. And again, PhD journey is quite dynamic and flexible. You might set out about something at the initial stage, which might actually interest the person that has chosen to supervise you. But as you go along the journey, some other new things might come up, which might a big change your path, like the COVID situation really brought to fore. A lot of people were not thinking of working in COVID, but when it emerged, many people that were already in PhD now found opportunity to begin to do some works in that area, to begin to, get publications out there. So I think the most important thing is you being convinced of what you want to do. And again, some have spoken about contacting supervisors. So at times you might not have clarity about what you want to do. Researching the schools and the supervisor can also give you an insight into what they are doing, and you might be able to begin to tailor your proposal towards that for them to see you as, the veritable candidate that might be selected for them to work with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Igazi. Thank you. And so, like we said last week, if you feel like you don't have research experience, I think Samuel mentioned last week that you can strengthen other aspects of your application. So your application is not judged solely on research experience. So strengthening other aspects will give you a better chance. We spoke exhaustively last week about emailing supervisors. I can still see some questions in the chat box about emailing supervisors. I will kindly advise that you watch the videos from last week, just because we are time constrained here. Yeah, so many people really want to know what master's opportunities are available in New Zealand and in Australia. Because yeah, I know you did your master's in New Zealand, but I would like Emmanuel to start in Australia, apologies. But I would like Emmanuel to start off telling us what master's opportunity. If I don't want to do a PhD and I just want to do master's, is it possible for me to get a fully funded scholarship to do my master's in New Zealand? Emmanuel, what do you think?
Yeah. Excuse me. When it comes to getting a funded master's position in most universities in New Zealand, there are funded positions in all universities in New Zealand. However, I think priorities are given most especially to PhDs or international students. It is I have really not come across, probably this is going to lead me to a different discussion on, maybe we'll get to that, yeah, on the different scholarship for both PhDs and masters. So for masters, there's only one path, and that is the New Zealand Aid Scholarship. Unlike the university's funded scholarship, there are not many funded master's position in New Zealand for prospective master's students. Rather, what you would get is a lot of PhD positions. So yeah, I don't think one would get. Did I answer the question, Gift?
Yeah, just to reiterate, did you say there are so many funded PhD positions, but very
Yes,
limited master's
a
scholarship.
very limited master scholarship, especially if it is sponsored, if they are university sponsored. But we have lots of master's positions that are funded by the New Zealand government through the New Zealand aid and the New Zealand scholarship. These are government funded scholarship, and you have to come in here for 1 year and 2 years, and there is a condition attached to that. You have to leave. 2 weeks after you submit your thesis, one has to leave if you're coming in on such scholarship. So I don't think I've seen any master scholarship student all the way from Africa, but I've seen a lot from Chinese, from China, from Asian students, those that are funded by their own government, or those that also got scholarships from New Zealand government.
That explains a
You,
lot.
yeah, you won't find universities. I don't think they really spend more money on master's position as they do on PhD positions.
Thank you, Emmanuel. That explains a lot. Thanks. Chigozie, not Chigozie. Chinonso, do you want to speak on that a bit, please?
Okay, thank you, Gifts. For Australia, on the other hand, I think there are quite a number of master's scholarship for whoever that wants to go for the master's program there. I mean, a classical example of that is Chigozie. He's currently finished from the master's program, so that explains it all. But of course, from what Emmanuel said, for what is what, there are some scholarship that you will get, and there will be a condition like Chevening scholarship and Commonwealth, where you are expected to go back to your country and impact or try to develop your country for at least a minimum of 2 years. So, however, there are still masters by research and masters of philosophy in Australia, and those masters are research-based masters, and you're eligible to apply if you consider yourself a very strong candidate. And that scholarship is quite open to most of the top universities in Australia. For example, the Group of H University, there are eight universities called the Group of H Universities, and they are all Australian best research universities, the likes of University of Melbourne, the likes of University of Queensland, the likes of University of Sydney, New South Wales, even Western Australia National University. So they have different scholarship, especially for those who are going into research-based programs. So if you are considering to do your master's in Australia, I'll probably advise against going for thought masters, because obviously you'll be spending most of your money trying to pay for your tuition fee. I think one of our mentors had a master's thought masters in Australia, and he only got about 50% discount off the tuition fee. So he was able to pay the remaining part of the bill. But if you are considering a fully funded scholarship in Australia, then the best way to go about it is by applying for Masters by Research program, which is more like a mini program to the PhD program, just 2 years program, and then, you're there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chinonso. Chigozie, thinking about this and looking at you got your master's in Australia and it was a scholarship. Can you kindly tell us about the AAS scholarship and how to apply for it and any other master's scholarship you know of in Australia?
Right. Thank you, Gifts. Before talking about the AAS scholarship, I'll just touch briefly on other available master scholarship, which I think to a large extent, Chinonso has spoken to that. For masters, for MPhil and masters by research, you could get some scholarship, but if you are looking at thought masters like MSc, most of the scholarship available are partial scholarship. They are not fully funded. So one need to have that at the back of one's mind. But for PhD, generally, you could get a fully funded scholarship with living expenses attached to it. So coming back to the AAS scholarship, which is the Australia Award Scholarship. This is a developmental scholarship by the Australian government, which the overarching goal is to use it as a sort of Australian soft diplomacy to the country with which they have diplomatic relationship by raising cohorts of graduates that will be able to contribute to the development of their country. So, as has been mentioned by Emmanuel, one of the requirements of this scholarship is that at the end of your study, you have to return to your country to contribute to the development of the country. That is the objective, but again, the other aspect to it is not strictly return to your country. You have to leave Australia for at least 2 years. So anyone considering Australia Award Scholarship should have that at the back of his or her mind. But again, it's a great scholarship. Of it's gonna give you that international exposure to Australian education, and it's fully funded. Everything from your trip to Australia to your living, to your tuition, everything is funded. So getting it, you are virtually spending nothing. So in terms of applying for the Australia Award Scholarship, uh, usually the scholarship application opens around October every year, and runs for application process runs for like 3 months, from October to early December. Applications are received, and shortlist will be made like in February, March, with interview happening like May, and by July, those that are successful are notified, and by November they are given pre-departure briefing, and by January they should be on their way to Australia. But that was when things were normal. Under the new normal, with COVID situation, for this year there has been a lot of delays. Even up till now, the interview for those that applied last year have not been conducted, and I don't know if application rounds will open for this very year. So one of the requirement again for Australia Award Scholarship is at least minimum of 2 years work experience, either in the private or public sector of your country. And there are what you call priority area. For Nigeria, we have 5 major priority areas. We have extractive industry, transportation, public policy, education, and trade policies. Sorry, agriculture. So these are the 5 priority area for Nigeria. But being that health is like a connecting area for all of that, so health is also included. So if you have your primary qualification in any of this priority area, or you are working in any of this priority area and you have at least 2 years work experience, then you are eligible to apply for the Australia Award Scholarship. And in the application process, one of the things that could stand you out is what is referred to as your reintegration action plan, because right from the word go, you should be able to demonstrate what you'll be able to do if you get the Australian education or return back to your country. And that should align with the developmental need of your country. So putting out your plan as per, okay, this is the deficient area in my country, in the priority area I'm coming from, and this is what I feel I'll be able to achieve by acquiring this very scholarship and acquiring the associated skill, can actually stand you out to be shortlisted and invited for an interview. And the whole interview process is just about you selling yourself, being able to convince the interviewers that you are the right candidate to be given the opportunity. So apart from what might be the underside, which is the fact that you have to leave Australia at the end of the study, I think it's still a great platform for someone who is looking to expand both their educational and professional journey. It can always be, a pedestal for you to move higher, because I know people, I know an alumnus who got this scholarship, returned to Nigeria after the 2 years, got another scholarship and returned back to Australia for PhD. So instead of seeing that very 2 years requirement to go back as, a limiting factor, I think one should actually look at what career projection do you have for yourself? Because it's not just all about school. I think the work experience also counts a lot in your journey in life. I don't know if I've been able to answer your question.
Yes, to a very large extent, yes. Thank you so much. That was really exhaustive. Thanks. Yeah, let's move on to something else now. Many questions from the chat box has been relating to who exactly is a strong candidate. I know somebody has asked questions about what kind of CGPA can I have to be eligible to get a PhD scholarship. Other people have asked other things about other aspects of application. Samuel, do you want to tell us about what makes a good candidate stand out? What makes a good candidate?
Awesome. Thanks again for the opportunity to talk about this. So in Australia, for instance, and in many parts of the world, but I'll be specifically talking about Australia in today's meeting, because I know we've talked about what makes applications strong in other sessions of our, and if you really need the recording, as far as you're registered, I'm sure you will get it. So for Australia, there are two major funding routes that I am aware of. One of them is the Australian Government Research Training Program Scholarship, which is called AGR TPS. And the other one is International Postgraduate Research Scholarship. So in either case in either one of those scholarships, which is the funding agency that funds most of the universities in Australia for international students, you really have to have some certain, so there are several criteria. Let me start by saying, just like Chinonso said, please take note, these funding agencies, and many of them don't fund masters by coursework, sorry. You either have to take a master's by research or MPhil, which is also related to masters by research, or you either apply for a PhD. Now, when you do your application, there is a ranking system. The first ranking system is academic merit. So in this academic merit, when you put up your application, they will rank your academic merit as compared to other applicants that are putting in the same application. In this case, the academic merit selection is going to be done by individual institutions. So when you apply, just like if you made a first class, for instance, you will have a 10 points. If you made a 2-1 that is having a high CGPA, you might have a 9 points. But remember that the fact that you made a 2-1 is not automatic. The fact that you made a 4 point, it's not automatic that you will get a 9 points, because you will be ranked compared to other applicants that are applying for that same position. So even if you made a first class, you might not get the 10 points. That's what I'm trying to insinuate. So by the time you do that, and they follow the ranking position, they will rank everybody 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, then after 4, I think is 0. After the ranking, anybody that is less than 7% 7 points in the academic merit will automatically get a rejection email. Now, after that, they proceed down to recommendations. There are 3 categories for the recommendations. 2 is the recommendations from the individual supervisors, the people that are writing recommendations for you. That means when you submit your application. And secondly, the recommendation from the institution. That is why I always tell people that when you are talking to people that are going to write your referee report, they should be able to write exhaustively about you. And most importantly, they should be able to tell what percentile of your class are you, or percentile of the whole school. If possible, they should show that statistic. For instance, there is a score that is given to if you are ranked among the top 1% out of a particular proportion. So by the time they do that ranking system, the next thing is internal referee, which in this case, the school itself that is doing the recruitment will now write a recommendation based on how many percentile of the applicants that are going in are actually, the applicants that are applying for that position, what percentage of them are you? Then after that, they will now check your academic training. Academic training means you either have to have worked on a research project and have a thesis, or that is why I always tell people it's better to apply for Australian scholarships when you already have a master's degree. Look, with a master's degree, even if you don't have a lot of publication, at least you'll be able to present a thesis, which is an evidence of your academic training. Otherwise, you can also be found maybe working as a research assistant or in a research laboratory, something to tie you to the academic system to show that you have an evidence of research training. And that is also another 10 points. You could get 9 points, 8 points, 7 points, 6.5 points, as the case may be. The next one is research indicators. I remember when I was applying to Flinders University and I spoke with my supervisor, I gave her 10 publications. That was when I contacted her, long before the application window opened. And when she went through my publications, she emailed me back and said, you have wonderful publications, but if you apply with these papers, you won't go anywhere. And I was like, okay, this is 10 papers, but that means 10 papers is equal to 0, based on the ranking scheme. But you wouldn't blame her. She now told me that, do I have any unpublished data? I told her yes. And she said, okay, that I should make sure any paper that I'm publishing are actually indexed with journals that are SJR indexed, which is Kimago. Immediately, I went to my Google. Remember, one of my favorite quotes is Google to show yourself approved. I ran to Google and I looked for SJR journals. I saw that they were very expensive. I had to look for the ones I can afford. And I published about 2 to 3 articles within the space of 6 to 8 months before the application window opens. And with that, I now put up my application. Remember that if you put up your application, your position also matters. If you are the first author, that means you are the principal, you're not the principal investigator, but you are the owner of the research. You will have a higher point. If you are a second author, there is a point. Third author, there is also another point. Now, by the time they do all this, what do we call it? Selection, the institution will now just select 8 applications, which is their best 8 applications, and forward it to Australian government. Now, when they forward it to Australian government will now do those selections based on the amount of pool that they have and give the awards. And during my time, I was lucky to be among the 8, but unluckily, I declined it. I will share a document maybe in the chat that we also give a breakdown of what I just said. I will Google it maybe immediately when I drop the mic. Yeah, immediately when I stop talking, I will do a Google, share the document. I will actually share 2 documents. One of the documents is the one about the Australian government research training for postgraduate scholarships that I applied to at Flinders. I will drop that document. And the second is the ranking scheme that most of the international IPRS and many other educational. So if you don't have a master's and you want to apply for master's by research, yes, you can get it. Just make sure that the other indicators are very high. Do you understand what I'm saying? You can't be applying from a bachelor's because you have a first class and you don't have publications indexed with SGR journal. Your recommendations are not top notch. You're not going anywhere. By the time they will filter you with the other population, remember you are also applying alongside other world best students. So I'll do my best to make sure I share those documents to the chat box so that everybody will be able to see it. And yeah, before I drop the mic, I, on behalf of everybody, want to thank Emmanuel, among others. You might not know him pretty well, but he was my colleague, senior colleague. We worked in the same university, and he was the first person to lay that pedestal for me. He had a 5.0 in his master's, and I was like, what? I must do this. And finally, I chased his record, and I was able to hit it. Thank you so much for the audience, and I'll drop the document immediately after now. Yes, I'll search for it in a minute.
Thank you so much, Samuel. Yeah, if you have further questions for Samuel, please, we'll be sharing the webinar, the panelist profile later on. You can actually text him on LinkedIn or Twitter or WhatsApp, whichever his preferred means of communication is. Do you want to add something to what Samuel has said?
Well, let me just quickly do a recap. I did Australia research some time ago. I applied to some Australian schools. I got the admission, but I did not go. Okay, so let me quickly just say one or two things about Australia that many people have said. Okay, now for Australia, if you have very good work or volunteering experience, it will be nice. Even if you don't have very good research output, you can use it to also, do as a backup, because every application in Australia is addressed holistically. You cannot just compare with another person. Some may go through and some may not go through. And then I would also like to say that some schools always mention the number of publications they want. If you want to apply for a PhD, some schools will say it and some schools will not say it. For example, University of Queensland, they specifically said that you don't need to have a first class if you have MSc, work experience and publications. You can get a scholarship. For those who are interested in that, you can just check. But for a bachelor's degree, you must have a first class if you want to apply for a master's or PhD degree. Another I would like to say is that if you don't have research experience, you have research output, you can express your undergraduate, your thesis. You can justify that you know how to write by sharing your undergraduate thesis with any supervisor that you talk to, you search online. That's very important. And then you can also convince the person that you are in the process of publishing it. We have said it many times that publication is very important. If you don't have publication or you're not thinking of doing publication, Australia is not necessarily for you. And if I may ask, if you want to do PhD in Australia, there's no coursework as much as I know. Maybe some have, but largely there's no coursework. We are going for a research trade up. So they need you to be very vast. I applied to a particular school then. As good as my research is, the school rejected me. Why? They said they needed like 5 publications or so. And I think I had 1 or 2 that time. And it was very good. They said no. So that's to tell you that you need very good research. Let me quickly check again. Okay, let me talk about school life in Australia. From what I've gathered so far, you have unlimited work hours as a PhD student. I know that. If you have a wife, you are thinking of bringing a wife, your spouse can work too, which is very nice. There's no visa restrictions. They do global talent. For those of you that don't like Australia, they do global talent visa, and then you can get your PR in 14 days or 1 month. If you can, I'm sure of that. So there's African market everywhere. There's no pressure from professors. So Australia is a good place to go. Let me really talk about the scholarships in general. We have the government scholarship, and we have the institution-based scholarship. The government scholarship, we have the research training scholarship. I'm talking for what I've written here, so it's what I know I'm saying. We have the research training program. We have the Australian award, like they have discussed, and we have destination Australia regional scholarships. I think Australia too I think they have some regions too that they have their scholarship too. And then we have the institution-based scholarship where you have to check the profile, contact professors, and then you have to talk to them, stuff like that. So This is what I just like to share. But most importantly, please make sure you know how to send emails. Last week webinar is very, very important. If you don't watch last week webinar, you don't understand what we are saying at all. It's as if we are speaking Latin. Please, last week seminar, please, if you have missed it, please check it, and then you can now check this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dimo. As I've stated severally, the webinar for last week was recorded, and you can always go back to watch it if you want to. For those dropping their emails in the chat box, if you registered for this session, we already have your emails, and we'll be sending out the documents Samuel has sent, as well as the scholarships the one has mentioned, and other important information from this session. We are aiming to finish earlier today because of Australian and New Zealand panelists and the time zone difference. But I just really want to ask Emmanuel the same question that Samuel and Diwon has answered. So Emmanuel, from a New Zealand perspective, what makes a good candidate? What makes an application stand out? Emmanuel, you're muted. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, I just noticed that, and yeah. Thanks once again, Gift. And while Samuel and I think Chigozie were talking, I think the last speaker too, I actually drafted down some things. I'm going to start with based on a personal experience, and I'm also going to go into what I've heard from others, and also, yeah, in my own case, it was actually something different. Getting the PhD position was not really now for the university-based sponsored scholarship. That was what I went for, because I realized I was already too late for the New Zealand-based government-sponsored scholarship. Now, starting from the New Zealand-based scholarship, like the NZ New Zealand Aid Scholarship, the New Zealand Grad Scholarship, and the New Zealand Commonwealth Scholarships. These three are actually the government-based scholarship. One requirement is to have, I think someone has already mentioned that, either Chigozie or somebody mentioned that, you must have a 2 years working experience, at least a 2 years working experience, which could be part-time or in a full-time. And also you must choose a field that will be beneficial to your country back home. It has to be something you can go back home and practice. And how this is actually done, I don't know. How they eventually end up selecting their candidates, it's something that I don't really know, because yeah, I didn't apply for it and I don't know how it's done. But from those that I've actually listened to, some Nigerians that are here who have that scholarship, one thing they actually did mention was the ability to actually demonstrate that they are better candidates than the others, to show the importance of whatever they want to come study here back, how it's going to benefit the country back home. That's one thing, and that's actually done through writing. So there are essay portals in the application form, and most of them were able to demonstrate they actually can will benefit the country back home. Now, for the university or institution-based scholarship, starting from a personal experience, when I sent in my application, I didn't apply directly to the university. I actually sent out my CV to a professor in biology at the University of Canterbury. I also did trial about two other universities, University of Lincoln, University of Auckland. Yeah, these are the three universities I tried here in New Zealand. And I just sent out the CV. And in my CV, about 2 or 3 pages CV, that's the only thing the professor saw. Funny enough, he did not want a student, but he was so kind enough to send out my CV to my current supervisor and another professor. My current supervisor is actually in chemical engineering, and another supervisor in biology. And they saw the CV and reached out to me. And one thing they actually did mention that they did like in the CV was my publications, the publications that I actually listed in the CV. So for Oceania, from what I actually found out for Oceania, your grades really matter. Your first degree bachelor's grade really matter. Your second degree master's, that is also very, very important. So like Samuel Adele actually said, these things are going to be put and compared to other people coming from other countries. And here we don't even, I didn't need to write an IELTS. I don't know why, but I met some other students who had to. But somehow, by divine providence, it was waived for me. And another thing that is also important is a well-written proposal. Now, your supervisors wants to know, even if I cannot supervise you in your chosen area, I want to know how you're able to demonstrate how you would want to carry out a research, a well-written proposal. The proposal I submitted to my supervisors, my current supervisor, is not actually what I'm working on currently. So a well-written proposal, even if they are not going to be able to supervise you in that area, they want to see you demonstrate the ability to write, like someone just mentioned. Yeah, and yeah, I think basically that's it. That's what I think it is. Publications, your grades, a well-written proposal. These are going to be placed in the pool. I don't know how they do the ranking system, but I believe these were what were used in um, giving or getting scholarship um, by the university-based scholarship providers.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Welcome.
And like we said, if you feel like your CGPA is not high enough, please ensure that you strengthen other aspects of your application. So if it's your research proposal, ensure that it is extremely well written, and just ensure that you strengthen other aspects of your application. Somebody asked in the chat box, what is the difference between statements of purpose and research proposal? Chinon, so please you want to take that?
Okay, thank you, Gift. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I'll start by answering the question presented to me. And at the end, I will still add something regarding PhD application as well, which obviously most scholars like Samuel and Emmanuel have added to. For a statement of purpose, it's more like about you, like why do you want to do this particular program? You know, what experiences do you have? What do you want to come here to do? Like what knowledge do you intend to gain, and how would that inform your future career and aspirations? And also you also have the opportunity to share your experiences, you know, your internship experiences, your undergraduate experiences, and even your postgraduate experiences. So it's more like an all-rounded information about you, what you want the program, why the university, what do you think you like about the university, and how do you think the university curriculum will help you towards achieving your goal. You know, those things are things that you need to highlight in your statement of purpose. You know, telling them the rationale or the reason behind your wanting to do this particular course. Then research proposal, on the other hand, is basically what you are going to work on. Like what topic are you going to work on for your MSc by research or Master of Philosophy or PhD degree? So it's basically starting from the background of the topic you have proposed. Then you talk about the background, that's more like the introduction of your study. And then you go on to discuss the aims and objectives of what you're going to do. And following the aims and objectives, you also have to, in some instance, you might even include the statement of problem, like what problem are you going to address in your research or in your proposal? More like a justification for why you are intending to do that particular research. And then going on from there, you have to also talk about the methodology. What means are you going to use to achieve that goal? What data are you going to use? Are you going to use primary data collection or secondary data or qualitative or quantitative analysis? What specific methods are you going to use to carry out the research and answer the research questions you have already purported in the previous introduction? And then moving on from there, you also have to explain the significance of the study. Why is it important that you want to do this research at this point in time? Why should we even take you for the scholarship, or why should we spend money, so much money on you for you to come and do this particular research? What is it going to do for not just the people around your study area, but also the public in general? So stating the significance of the study is also part of your research proposal. And in some instances, you will be asked to include a timeline. What are you going to do first? What are you going to do second? What are you going to do third? You have to say, in my first year, I will have to do data collection, or maybe take on courses that are associated with a PhD degree. And following that, I would have to go on into data analysis. So you have to specifically outline the timeline for each of the program you're going to, each of the research you're going to do, and how that will inform them towards accepting your proposal. Because the essence of that is to know that you have already mapped out your timeline, and you're going to finish this project in so and so years or number of months. Like, let's take, for example, in most universities in Australia, their PhD programs takes minimum of 3 years and maximum of 4. So if you're making a proposal, for example, you need to make sure that your proposal aligns with the limited number of years that you're going to spend doing that particular research. If it is a master's by research program, then you have to make a proposal that aligns with the 2 years duration you're going to be that you're going to be allowed while doing that particular program. So that, I think, it's the disparity between statement of purpose and research proposal. Then going back to the things you needed to do, if for example, I know most people here are currently considering masters, and just a handful of people are considering PhD as well. So I know I've had a question from one of my friends. He was asking me, how many research publications did you use when you're applying for a PhD in Australia, University of Queensland to be precise? So actually, my undergraduate study research has been published, but of course I didn't use that. I think it's also stemmed from the reason Samuel shared. It's a study that was published in a low-profile journal. We'll call it a predatory journal. Journals that are out there looking for how to get your study published within the shortest period of time. Any publication, I think, that accepts your paper within the space of 3 weeks or maybe 1 month, I'm not entirely sure that's a very good journal, because it takes considerable amount of time to do peer review. When I actually published my master's thesis, I know what I passed through. I know what the energy I put in. It goes back and forth. Like, you send to the reviewer, you send to the editor, they come back to you and saying, you're supposed to do this, or, it has to pass through like 2 different reviews. And of course, going through that review section, you need to make sure that you address all the points that was made in that review. So for me, I think the only publication that stood out for me when I was applying for a PhD in University of Queensland was my master's thesis. And then it also boils down to what Samuel said. If you're doing a BSc and you have a first class, and maybe even if you made 5.0 in your BSc and you think you're a very strong candidate for PhD, well, I think the only thing that would make you really stronger is if you can publish your BSc thesis in a high-profile journal that is being identified by most of these Australian schools, because that would potentially make you a strong candidate for any position that is being considered. So yes, I use only my master's thesis for a PhD application in University of Queensland. I had to take out the previous publication I've had, because they are not something I would say it's not like I'm not proud of them, but it's not something that would potentially make me a strong candidate for the position that is being advertised. And so, and luckily for me, when that particular scenario came up, my supervisor actually told me categorically that I need a publication that I am the first author. This is one of the challenges we have in Nigeria, because most times we do a research, and sometimes even our supervisor will say, I'm going to be the first author, I'm going to be, even have to bring in some other persons to be the first author. In fact, when I was about publishing my BSc thesis, my supervisor included names of one of my lecturer even before my name. The work is my work, and I'm not saying it's actually bad, but I'm only saying that, you know, sometimes Nigerian system are made it so much so that we believe that you have to be the first author for you to have really strong contribution in a particular paper. But that's not the way the white people say it, because a corresponding author who might even be the last person in the publication even have much more weight than someone who is just the first author. Because a corresponding author is someone that is a supervisor. So they take it like your supervisor, the person that is being contacted if, for example, there's an equation arising from your publication. So for me, I had to publish my master's, and I think that's one of the strong things that helped me secure a fully funded PhD position in University of Queensland. And it was just one publication. So if you are interested in going for PhD in Australia, there are so many, someone was talking about Australian Government Research Training Scholarship, but I think there's even more scholarship in the university parastatal, because the research training scholarship in universities are way more bigger than what Australian governments are paying for. For example, in my school, there are more like, I think during my year, my sets, that was last year, there was about, I think it was about up to, give and take, it should be about more than 180 applicants, 180 scholarships that was awarded in just University of Queensland alone. And I know University of Melbourne, usually they put up an advert for up to 600 graduate research position scholarships in Melbourne as well. The same with most of the group of 8 universities in Australia. So I believe that if you're really keen on getting a PhD or a master's by research in Australia, you just need to maybe work a little bit on your publication. Yes, your academic qualification goes a long way to tell about yourself, but I think you also need to at least get a even if it's one. I used one publication and it got me in. So you don't need 5. I know there was a supervisor I contacted in Flinders University that actually told me, when we had a conversation, she told me that I believe you have a stellar profile, but you need at least 5 publications to secure a PhD in University of Flinders. And I was like, okay, I'm not even way near what he's proposing. And I was like, well, I give up. I have to go and look for some schools that actually that will welcome me with even the little one I have. Because at the end of the day, submitting 10 publications that are not really in high-profile journals will do you no good. But if you have one strong publication, that would make all the difference for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shinas. Thank you so much to all our panelists. I would, Abubakar asked the question. I would just want us to speak about, lastly, before we make a stop. Let me read the question. It said, how should you go about it if you're asked to write a 1-page statement of purpose? Because maybe you have so many things to talk about that cannot be put together in a single page. And I think this is a very interesting question, because many scholarships require you to write about your achievements in 250 words or 300 words. Your ability to condense all your achievements and make them fit into 1 page is part of the examination, it's part of the test, it's part of what sets you apart. And I feel like it's a skill that everyone should learn. So even if you have so many experiences, you should be able to condense those experiences into 1 page. You should be able to know what is actually important and what is not, and put that into 1 page. I don't know if someone wants to add anything to that.
Yes, I can talk about this very briefly. This is just like saying when you go for the 3-minute thesis competition and you are told to present your thesis that is actually more than 50,000 words, that is technically more than 50,000 words, and you should present it in 3 minutes. So you should be able to identify redundancies. One thing that I know about so many Nigerian writers, so many of us that write essays, is that we love using words that are very elaborate instead of using very short and precise words. These are techniques in scientific writing. And then secondly, there are stories that are not important. When you're told, for instance, to write, let's say, okay, let me just choose something very simple. They said, in 250 words, please present to us your statement of purpose. Remember that there is a difference between statement of purpose and personal statement. Statement of purpose is you trying to tell what you are about to go and do. The purpose, the main reason why you're coming for that study. If you are to talk about a personal statement, for instance, you are to talk about your previous history, who you have been, what you are becoming, and where you are going. But a statement of purpose means you want to come here for a master's in law. Why are you coming here? So you should not go and start in a statement of purpose saying, as a child, I have been so passionate about law. No, that is what many people do. Nobody is interested of knowing what happened to you when you were a child. But you should be able to stand and say, Nigerians suffer injustice due to the absence of a very good legal system. 2% of the people, about 5% of Nigerians go to jail because there is no public whatsoever that is able to stand on their behalf. Having taken a look at the institution, I find out this and this and this and this. I have been able to research this and this and this and find out that this happened. You know, you don't have to start saying, my father died of cancer in 2 years and he was arrested by a policeman. Nobody is looking for, look, okay, let me put it like this. There are two classes of writing. One is sympathetic, the other is empathetic. A lot of people write essays to drive the sympathy of the reader. That is how many of us write. I have read too many personal statements that I'm even tired. But when you look at another style of essay, this person is not writing because he wants to drive your sympathy. He's writing because he wants to tell you, I have something. So instead of me to say, okay, one more thing is, instead of using passive sentences, I would be very grateful if I am considered for this fantabulous and prestigious position. We write big grammar. There's nothing like I would have been. Instead, I am confident that I am a best fit for this position. It's not that I would have been very grateful if you use your kind gestures to give my application a favorable consideration. No, those big words are too much. So one thing I will just say is, for those who are not good with scientific writing and how to condense words, remember to go to Coursera. There are so many writing, what do we call it? Writing courses, short courses that are available on Coursera that will help you to condense as large as 5,000 words into what? 250 words. That is the first thing you need to learn. And think about this. How would you publish a 5,000 page, or let's say 50,000 page thesis, and then they will tell you to write a 1-page abstract to describe everything you have done? So that means there are some information that shouldn't be communicated. So if you are writing and you are finding out that this information is becoming too redundant, then delete it. I will really recommend you go down to, there is a writing short course that is being provided by Harvard University. I also took it during my application season. That is being provided by Harvard University. Is going to change your life about how to write those big words and condense them into short paragraph. I just feel I've said a lot. Maybe I should stop here.
Thank you. I was wondering if you can share the link to the course you just mentioned, so we send that out as emails to people who have registered.
Sure, I'll look out for that now.
Thank you. And so, yeah, this is where we draw the curtain. Thank you so much, everyone, for asking really exciting questions about applying to Australia and New Zealand. We hope we've been able to sort of provide some kind of clarification for your application process. Also, I really want to thank the panelists, especially Chigozie and Emmanuel and others, but I'm mentioning Chigozie and Emmanuel because I am very aware of the time difference and how much sacrifice you guys have made to be here with us today. Thank you so much for your time and for your very insightful contributions. Also, this session was being is recording. Yeah, it's being recorded, and we'll be sending out these recordings to people who registered and who we have their emails. We'll also be sending out the recordings of previous sessions for people who have not gotten them yet. So you might have an opportunity to go through them and still get, because we've discussed so many things exhaustively, like emailing professors, GRE, IELTS, statements of purpose and all of that. We've discussed some of these in previous sessions. So you guys will really, really enjoy listening to them all over. Like I said last week also, you can join the FCLN group if you have a first class, and you can always send an email back to, if you've been getting our emails, you can reply the email with a proof of your first class degree and your phone number, and you'll be added to the FCLN group. Yeah, also, if you've not registered, Nidia has shared the Eventbrite page, so you can always still register for next week's session. Next week, we'll be having Africa and Asia. So for people who want to study in China, in Japan, in Singapore, you really, really enjoy next week's session. And also, at the end of the session today, we'll be sending out a survey. The survey is an opportunity for you to reflect on what you've learned today, what you really like about today, what you really dislike about today, and what you can improve on next week. We really appreciate your honest contribution to this. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you so much, guys, and see you next week, hopefully.